Welcome to the quiet world of dreams.
Tonight, as you settle into a comfortable position, imagine that you are standing on the quiet shore of a small island in Nova Scotia. The evening air is cool. A light wind moves through the trees behind you, and the water of Mahone Bay rises and falls against the stones with a steady, patient rhythm. Somewhere beneath the ground lies a deep and damaged shaft. For more than 2 centuries, people have lowered themselves into that darkness, convinced that something important was waiting below. They have dug through clay, timber, stone, mud, and seawater. They have built platforms, pumps, tunnels, drills, and enormous steel-lined holes. Yet the deeper they have gone, the less certain the story has become. The shaft is usually called the Money Pit. According to the most familiar version of the legend, it was designed to defend itself. Whenever searchers approached its lowest chambers, seawater entered through hidden tunnels, filling the excavation and placing whatever lay at the bottom beyond their reach. It is an elegant idea. Somewhere under the island, an unknown group of engineers created a maze of drains and passageways. They buried a treasure deep in the earth, then connected the chamber to the Atlantic Ocean, ensuring that anyone who disturbed it would release the water above them. Perhaps the builders were pirates. Perhaps they were British or French soldiers. Perhaps they were members of the Knights Templar, carrying sacred objects across the ocean long before the accepted history of European settlement in North America. Or perhaps there was never a treasure chamber at all. As the wind moves across the bay, the mystery remains beneath your feet, not as a single untouched hole, but as a landscape transformed by generations of people who believed that one more careful excavation might finally reveal the truth. Oak Island is not especially large. It lies close to the mainland of Nova Scotia, among the many islands scattered through Mahone Bay. Today, a causeway connects it to the shore. From a distance, it appears peaceful and ordinary, covered with trees and surrounded by cold Atlantic water. There is nothing in its appearance that clearly announces a great secret. That ordinary quality is part of its attraction. A remote fortress or ruined temple might naturally invite stories of hidden wealth. Oak Island offers something quieter: a patch of earth, an old depression, a few pieces of wood, and water that will not stay away. The traditional story begins in 1795. A young man, often identified as Daniel McGuinness, is said to have noticed an unusual depression beneath a tree. Some versions describe a branch extending over the ground, with marks suggesting that a pulley had once been attached to it. McGuinness returned with 2 companions, usually named John Smith and Anthony Vaughan. Together, the young men began to dig. A few feet below the surface, they reportedly encountered soil that appeared to have been disturbed. Deeper down, they found a layer of logs or wooden planks. They continued until the difficulty of the work exceeded what 3 people could manage. In later retellings, this first excavation becomes the opening scene of an enormous historical puzzle. The depression is perfectly shaped. The branch waits above it like a silent clue. Wooden platforms appear at regular intervals, suggesting careful construction beneath the ground. There is, however, an important difficulty. No surviving document written in 1795 records this discovery. The earliest widely cited published accounts appeared many decades later, after organized treasure hunting had already begun. By then, memories had passed through several people, and the story had acquired details that are difficult to confirm. This does not prove that the discovery never occurred. People often began local projects without producing formal written records. A small excavation on a privately owned island might leave little paperwork, but it means that the familiar opening scene belongs partly to oral tradition. We can stand near the supposed location and imagine the young men lifting dark soil from the ground. We can hear their tools striking roots and stones. We can picture them stopping beside a layer of old timber. We cannot know precisely what they saw, what they believed, or even how closely the later story resembles the original event. The next stage of the search is somewhat better documented, although uncertainties remain. Around the beginning of the 19th century, a group commonly known as the Onslow Company began a larger excavation. According to later accounts, the workers reopened the pit and found wooden platforms at intervals of roughly 10 feet. They descended through layers described as clay, charcoal, putty-like material, and coconut fiber. At approximately 90 feet, they reportedly encountered a flat stone marked with unusual symbols. This object became one of the most famous pieces of the Oak Island story. In later versions, the symbols were translated into a message declaring that a great quantity of gold lay buried beneath the stone. The wording sounded almost too perfect, as though the island itself had chosen to encourage the people digging into it. Yet the stone has not survived in a form that can be reliably examined. Accounts differ about where it was taken and how it was used. Some say it was displayed in a shop. Others say that it was placed near a fireplace or incorporated into a building. No verified rubbing, photograph, or contemporary transcription allows modern researchers to study the original markings. The dramatic translation appeared long after the supposed discovery. It may have been genuine, misunderstood, exaggerated, or invented. The honest answer is that we do not know. The searchers continued downward. When they stopped work for the night, the pit was reportedly dry or manageable. When they returned, water had risen inside it. The level remained high despite efforts to remove it. Buckets and pumps could not keep pace. The workers dug a second shaft nearby and attempted to tunnel sideways toward the original pit, but water entered that excavation as well. This flooding became the central feature of the mystery. It transformed an abandoned shaft into a machine. If the water entered through a hidden system, then the builders had anticipated the arrival of intruders. They had understood the shoreline, the tide, the soil, and the pressure of seawater underground. They had created a structure that could remain inactive for years, perhaps centuries, until someone opened the protected chamber. Each failed attempt strengthened that interpretation. The water did not merely prevent the recovery of treasure, it seemed to confirm that treasure must exist. Why construct such a defense unless something valuable had been placed behind it? That question has guided much of the search ever since. For a while, however, Oak Island returned to silence. The abandoned workings filled with water and mud. Wood softened underground. The surface settled. Grass and low vegetation covered the disturbed earth. Then, in the middle of the 19th century, another generation arrived. The Truro Company resumed excavation in 1849. Its workers drilled into the ground, using tools that could bring small samples to the surface. Reports from this period describe layers of wood, fragments of metal, and links from what appeared to be a fine gold chain. Drilling also produced material interpreted as parchment. These findings are often repeated as evidence that the drill had reached a wooden chest containing manuscripts or precious objects. None of these early samples has provided conclusive proof. Drilling through old excavation debris can produce confusing results. Wood may come from earlier platforms or collapsed supports. Metal fragments may come from tools or equipment. Tiny materials can be misidentified, especially when they emerge coated with clay and water. The searchers were not neutral observers. They had invested labor and money in the belief that a treasure chamber existed. Every fragment carried the possibility of success. Still, they had encountered something beneath the surface, and the water continued to interfere with their work. Attention moved toward Smith's Cove, a beach on the eastern side of the island. There, searchers reported finding coconut fiber beneath the beach, along with a system of stones and drains arranged in a broad fan shape. These channels, they believed, gathered seawater and directed it through a tunnel toward the money pit. The design became known as the box drain system. In diagrams, it appears remarkably sophisticated. 5 finger-like drains extend from the shore. Water enters through layers of stone and fiber. The separate channels join a larger tunnel, which slopes toward the buried chamber. When the pit is opened at a certain depth, the sea pours through the system and defeats the excavation. The coconut fiber seemed particularly unusual. Coconut palms do not grow naturally in Nova Scotia. If large quantities of fiber had been deliberately placed beneath the beach before the treasure hunt began, someone must have transported it from a warmer region. Coconut fiber was used historically in shipping, packing, rope, and other maritime activities. Its presence could indicate human work around the cove, but the exact history of the samples is complicated. Material has been collected at different times, sometimes without the careful documentation expected in modern archaeology. The beach has also been repeatedly altered by treasure hunters, construction, storms, and excavation. Even if some fiber is old, its presence does not automatically prove the existence of a tunnel leading to a treasure chamber. The drains themselves are equally disputed. Some investigators have regarded the structures as clear human engineering. Others have suggested that stones along the beach were natural formations, later altered or interpreted through the expectations of searchers. Alternative explanations propose that some features may have been connected to salt production, ship repair, or other historical activities unrelated to buried treasure. The island's geology offers another possibility. Oak Island contains glacial deposits and soluble bedrock. Beneath the surface, water can move through cracks, cavities, loose soil, and natural channels. Excavating below the water table on a small island can create persistent flooding without any artificial trap. Tidal pressure may influence underground water, even when no direct tunnel connects the pit to the sea. A deep shaft acts like an invitation to groundwater. The farther it descends, the more paths the water may find. From the surface, the difference between a hidden tunnel and a natural channel is not always obvious. Both can fill a pit. Both can defeat pumps. Both can appear to react to the tide. This is one reason the mystery has survived. The same observation can support very different stories. Water enters the excavation. To a treasure hunter, it is evidence of a protective mechanism. To a geologist, it may be the predictable behavior of a disturbed island aquifer. To an engineer, it is a practical problem requiring better pumps, barriers, or drilling methods. The water itself does not tell us which interpretation is correct. During the 19th century, repeated attempts continued. Companies were formed, money was raised, and new shafts were dug. Some collapsed, others flooded. Wooden supports shifted under the pressure of earth and water. The original pit became increasingly difficult to locate. Each excavation disturbed the layers left by earlier searchers. Tunnels crossed older tunnels. New shafts entered collapsed ground. Timber from one period mixed with timber from another. Oak Island slowly became an archaeological site created not only by its unknown past, but by the people trying to uncover that past. This is important to remember. When old wood is found deep underground, it may come from an early structure. It may also come from a 19th century search shaft that collapsed and moved through unstable soil. When metal appears in a drill sample, it may be part of a hidden object. It may be a broken tool. The deeper the searchers worked, the more material they introduced into the ground. The island became a layered record of belief. In 1861, the search also became deadly. A pump or boiler accident resulted in the death of a worker. Later searches would claim additional lives. The most serious disaster occurred in 1965, when 4 men died after entering a shaft known as the Restore Pit. Gas or a lack of oxygen appears to have overcome the first man. Others descended in an attempt to rescue him and were also affected. The quiet earth had become genuinely dangerous, though not because of an ancient curse. Deep excavations can contain unstable walls, contaminated water, and air that cannot safely support life. The most immediate threats on Oak Island have often been ordinary physical ones: gravity, pressure, machinery, exhaustion, and the invisible composition of underground air. The deaths later became connected to a popular legend, claiming that 7 people must die before the treasure can be found. There is no reliable evidence that this prophecy existed at the beginning of the search. Like many parts of the Oak Island story, it appears to have grown later, adding a supernatural shape to a history already marked by real loss. The island did not need a curse to become dangerous. Human persistence was enough. By the early 20th century, the mystery had attracted attention beyond Nova Scotia. One notable investor was Franklin D. Roosevelt, long before he became President of the United States. As a young man, he participated financially in an Oak Island treasure hunting company and maintained an interest in the story. The appeal crossed social boundaries. Local workers, engineers, lawyers, business owners, writers, politicians, and adventurers could all look at the same flooded ground and see a different possibility. Some imagined pirate gold. Captain William Kidd became an early candidate because stories of buried pirate treasure were already widespread along the Atlantic coast, yet no reliable document connects Kidd to Oak Island, and the idea of pirates constructing an extremely deep, carefully engineered vault presents practical problems. Pirates generally needed wealth to remain accessible. A treasure buried beneath dozens of meters of earth, protected by a system capable of drowning the recovery operation, would also be difficult for its owners to retrieve. The elaborate design might protect the deposit from strangers, but it would protect it from the builders as well. Other theories shifted attention from pirates to military engineers. French forces once occupied important positions in Atlantic Canada. The fortress of Louisbourg on Cape Breton Island changed hands during 18th century conflicts. Some writers proposed that French soldiers or engineers hid money, military funds, or important documents on Oak Island. British forces have also been suggested. One theory connects the pit to treasure obtained during the British capture of Havana in 1762. These explanations at least place experienced engineers and large organized groups in the correct general historical world. European armies and navies possessed the knowledge to build complex underground works. But possibility is not evidence. No surviving military record describes the construction of a secret vault on Oak Island. No confirmed collection of French or British treasure has emerged from the pit. Another theory proposes that the buried object was not money at all. Perhaps the chamber protected documents. Supporters have suggested lost works of William Shakespeare, hidden records of secret societies, or religious manuscripts that could alter accepted history. Such theories often begin with a genuine absence or uncertainty elsewhere, then use Oak Island as a possible answer. The unknown contents of the pit become a blank space large enough to hold almost anything. Among the most persistent of these ideas is the connection to the Knights Templar. The historical Knights Templar were a medieval Christian military order founded in the early 12th century. They accumulated property and wealth across Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. Their order was suppressed in the early 14th century, and their dramatic fall encouraged centuries of legend. Because some Templar wealth was never clearly accounted for, later writers imagined that surviving members escaped with sacred or royal treasures. In the Oak Island version, Templars or their successors crossed the Atlantic and concealed objects beneath Nova Scotia. The treasure might include gold, religious relics, ancient manuscripts, or even the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail. The theory sometimes draws on supposed symbols, alignments, family connections, and similarities between carvings found in different locations. It is an absorbing story, but the evidential gap is enormous. There is no generally accepted archaeological proof that medieval Knights Templar reached Oak Island. No securely excavated Templar artifact has been recovered from an undisturbed medieval layer there. No contemporary European record describes such a voyage or construction project. Norse seafarers did reach North America centuries before Columbus, as confirmed by archaeology at L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland. Their presence demonstrates that medieval Atlantic crossings were possible, but evidence that one medieval European group reached part of North America does not prove that another group built the money pit. The Norse site is supported by identifiable structures, artifacts, and archaeological context. The Templar theory on Oak Island is supported mainly by interpretation and association. This does not make the story impossible in the broadest sense. History contains journeys and events that left little surviving evidence. It simply means that the Templar explanation should be described as speculation, not as an established historical conclusion. During the 20th century, the scale of the search increased. Heavy machinery replaced hand digging. Large sections of ground were opened, widened, drained, and refilled. Robert Restall and his family spent years living and working on the island before the fatal accident of 1965. Around the same period, a determined excavator named Robert Dunfield used heavy equipment to create an enormous crater in the Money Pit area. His work reached great depth and dramatically altered the site. Dunfield did not recover a treasure chamber. He also reported no clear evidence of the legendary flood tunnel in the walls of his excavation. This absence is significant, though not necessarily final. Earlier collapses and later disturbance may have destroyed features. The exact original location may have been uncertain. A tunnel might have been narrow, damaged, or missed. Yet a rational examination must include what was not found. If a large, carefully constructed tunnel connected Smith's Cove to the pit, an excavation exposing a broad area might reasonably be expected to reveal some trace of it. The lack of an unmistakable structure weakens the classic booby trap explanation. Later searchers continued to drill. One of the most famous projects was Borehole 10-X, developed under the direction of Dan Blankenship and his partners. The shaft descended more than 200 feet into the ground. Cameras lowered into a water-filled cavity produced unclear images. Some observers believed they could see wooden supports, tools, chests, or even human remains. Others saw only shadows, irregular rock, sediment, and the visual distortions created by dark water. Divers entered the shaft under extremely difficult conditions, but did not confirm the extraordinary objects suggested by the footage. Once again, Oak Island produced an image positioned between evidence and imagination. The camera had recorded something. The water did not allow anyone to see it clearly. In 1995, researchers from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution conducted scientific work on the island. Their investigation included tests intended to understand the movement of water. The results did not establish the legendary artificial tunnel system. Natural groundwater conditions and tidal influence offered a plausible explanation for the flooding. This did not end the search. Mysteries rarely disappear simply because a natural mechanism is available. A natural explanation must still account for the full site, and believers can argue that later damage concealed the original engineering. Modern work has recovered many objects from different parts of Oak Island. Coins, tools, spikes, buttons, fragments of metal, pieces of wood, and materials connected to earlier human activity. An island near a busy Atlantic coastline can contain traces of fishing, farming, shipping, military movement, settlement, repair work, and generations of treasure hunting. An old coin proves that an old coin reached the island. It does not, by itself, prove that the coin came from a treasure vault. The context of a discovery matters as much as the object. Was it found in an undisturbed layer? Was the location carefully recorded? Could it have been moved by soil, water, machinery, or earlier excavation? Does it form part of a larger pattern? These are slower questions than the simple question, how old is it? But they are the questions archaeology requires. The so-called Money Pit is no longer a clean archaeological shaft. It is a deeply disturbed area in which centuries of excavation have mixed natural geology, early activity, and modern material. This makes certainty difficult in both directions. It is difficult to prove that a treasure chamber exists. It is also difficult to reconstruct exactly what the earliest searchers encountered. The original evidence has been dug through, flooded, collapsed, drilled, and rearranged. What remains is a mystery partly created by the destruction of the place being investigated. And so we return to the idea of the booby trap. Could someone have built such a system? In principle, people have engineered mines, canals, drains, cisterns, tunnels, and coastal defenses for thousands of years. A group with sufficient knowledge and labor could create underground passages designed to admit water. The question is not whether human beings were technically capable. The question is whether they did so on Oak Island. To answer that, we would need reliable physical evidence, a clearly artificial tunnel, construction marks, datable materials in secure context, tools or structural remains connected to the same building phase, and perhaps documentary evidence explaining who carried out the work. At present, the classic system of a treasure chamber, protected by ocean-fed tunnels, remains unproven. The flooding may result largely or entirely from natural geology. Some shoreline structures may have served purposes unrelated to treasure. Later excavation may have confused the evidence. Several explanations may even be partly true at the same time. There may have been early human activity on the island. There may have been an old shaft or industrial structure. There may have been coconut fiber used near the shore. Natural water may then have entered later treasure excavations, encouraging the belief that all these features formed one intentional mechanism. Human minds are skilled at connecting scattered details. Usually, this ability helps us understand the world. On Oak Island, it can also create a single grand design from objects that may have separate histories. A stone becomes a coded message. A piece of fiber becomes a filter. A flooded shaft becomes a trap. A medieval symbol becomes a Templar signature. A fragment of metal becomes the edge of a chest. None of these interpretations is impossible simply because it is dramatic, but each requires evidence strong enough to carry the weight placed upon it. After more than 200 years, no universally accepted treasure has been recovered from the money pit. That fact can be interpreted in two ways. Perhaps the hiding place was so effective that generations of searchers have still not defeated it. Or perhaps the search has continued because the absence of treasure can always be explained by one more collapse, one more flooded chamber, one more error in location, or one more layer waiting below. The mystery renews itself through failure. Every unsuccessful excavation suggests that the treasure lies slightly deeper or slightly to the side. Every obstruction appears to be evidence of design. Every fragment offers another reason to continue. Yet it would be unfair to describe the entire history only as foolishness. The people who came to Oak Island were responding to something deeply human. They were drawn by the possibility that the visible world was incomplete. A quiet island might contain a chamber built by unknown hands. An ordinary shoreline might conceal a story connecting pirates, soldiers, medieval orders, lost manuscripts, and distant voyages. The search offered more than wealth. It offered contact with an undiscovered past. For some, Oak Island became a family inheritance. Children grew up hearing the story and later returned as adults. Researchers spent years studying maps and records. Workers learned the behavior of the soil and water through long experience. The treasure hunt created its own community, archives, rivalries, losses, and traditions. Even if no golden chamber is ever found, that history is real. Now, in the darkness, imagine the island becoming quiet again. The machinery has stopped for the night. The ground around the old excavations is still. Water rests inside pipes, cracks, boreholes, and flooded shafts. Beyond the trees, the tide continues to move through Mahone Bay. It follows no legend. It rises through the pull of the moon and settles against the shore as it did before the first recorded searcher arrived. Somewhere below, old timbers may remain pressed into clay. They may belong to an unknown early structure or to one of the many companies that tried to reach the bottom. There may be a chamber. There may be only fractured rock, seawater, and the remains of previous attempts. Oak Island does not offer a final answer tonight. Instead, it leaves us with a quieter question. How much of a mystery lies beneath the ground, and how much is built slowly above it, through memory, hope, loss, and repetition? Perhaps one day a carefully documented discovery will settle part of the story. A secure archaeological context may reveal who worked on the island and why. A surviving structure may show that the water system was artificial. A record may emerge from an archive, or continued investigation may strengthen the simpler conclusion that geology and generations of excavation created the puzzle together. Until then, the most rational position is neither absolute belief nor absolute dismissal. People were present on Oak Island before and during the early treasure hunts. They left objects and altered parts of the landscape. A deep excavation existed by the early 19th century, though the exact details of its origin are uncertain. The workings repeatedly flooded. Numerous groups tried and failed to recover a great treasure. Beyond those facts, the ground becomes less stable. The tunnels, the coded stone, the pirate vault, the sacred relics, and the Templar voyage remain stories awaiting stronger evidence. You can allow them to remain there without needing to choose one tonight. The wind passes softly through the trees. The wooden remains beneath the island are quiet. The water enters the earth through roots that may be natural, artificial, or long since changed beyond recognition. And at the center of it all is an empty space, imagined more often than it has ever been seen. A chamber beneath a chamber. A dark place surrounded by clay and seawater. Something may wait there. Or the true treasure of Oak Island may be the story itself. A story durable enough to survive every failed excavation, every broken pump, every collapsed shaft, and every generation that promised to be the last. For now, the tide continues to rise. The island keeps its uncertain history, and you can leave the shore slowly, carrying no gold, no secret manuscript, and no final solution. Only the calm image of the bay beneath the night sky, and the thought of all the places where history has left a door partly open. In another quiet journey, we may follow one of those doors far from Nova Scotia, across a darker stretch of ocean, toward a vessel found drifting without its crew. But that mystery can wait. Tonight, Oak Island remains behind you, surrounded by cold water, old stories, and the soft movement of the Atlantic tide.